Hello and welcome again to the Near Futurist podcast with me, Guy Clapperton, talking to decision makers about actionable points that will affect us in, wait for it, the near future. It's as if I'd put a clue in the title. Now this week, here's the concluding part of an interview I did this month with Professor Dimitra Simeonidou of the UK 6G testbed. But first, as always, here's a blatant plug for my media training service. Do you or your clients want to sound as confident, clear and fluent in media interviews as the people in this podcast? Of course you do. My team and I can help. Drop my assistant Lindsay, that's lindsay@clapperton.co.uk, a note and she'll set us a time for an initial chat. Or go to the website at clapperton.co.uk, 2 Ps, to find out more. Now, back to the podcast. Is it just me, or am I sounding older since recording that? Can't think how that would have happened. Anyhow, 6G interview part 2. In part 1, Dimitra spoke about how 6G would aim to plug some of those gaps in coverage that plague 5G users, even on a small island like Britain, also the possible incorporation of satellite technology. In the second part, I kicked off by asking, are we really going to have to upgrade our phones all over again just for minor improvements?
Yeah. I absolutely agree. I was the last one to upgrade my phone on 5G. I've done 6 years research on 5G, and then I didn't upgrade my phone until actually about 12 months ago. And the reason is because I knew that as a consumer, because of the non-standalone deployment of 5G, I would get zero benefit as a consumer. So I think that we should keep our devices and our infrastructure for as long as we are getting the service from the current devices that we need. Do not jump to a new device unless you need it. And that is a fact. Now, when we are going to 6G, if we start actually using satellite connectivity into our phone, we would need a new phone to make this happen. If we start actually bringing new elements, new access devices, for instance, optical wireless, some people are talking about optical wireless, we would need the kind of phones or the kind of devices that they are going to be able to utilize interfaces like this. But this should happen only and when we need this. So it has to make sense. And of course, if actually 6G gets into a point that doesn't give us this kind of breaks of connectivity in our journeys, for example, or generally in our lives, then maybe it is worth considering to get a 6G phone. We are so far away from that, really very far away from that. I think what we are going to see in all reality is not so many upgrades in the user devices to start with, but upgrades in the infrastructure, because 6G is going actually to be very much data-driven. It's going to utilize quite a lot AI machine learning to optimize networks and services. And therefore, we need to put a lot of sensors in the infrastructure for monitoring. For instance, monitor how much energy we consume, monitor the performance that we are delivering. It's going to be very much data-driven network. I think that we are going to see more actually investment on software layers and monitoring infrastructure that we are going to see in new radios.
What triggers should we be looking for when it's necessary to upgrade our equipment?
That's a very good question. The one is that if there is a 6G service that now that my phone is not receiving, it is essential to me. And we talked previously in the previous questions around connectivity everywhere. So if I actually get into a network, or I would like to connect into a network that actually provides satellite connectivity into my phone, then at that point, I know that I should actually replace my phone. If actually my service is absolutely fine with my 5G phone, then I should keep my phone for as long as possible. And this is quite important from sustainability reasons point of view as well. So we are not at an age that we should, without thinking, replace machines, replace infrastructure. So that is something that we should be looking at. as we are coming into 6G, quite a lot of the upgrades, there are going to be software upgrades rather than hardware upgrades. So probably we are going to see software tools coming and upgrades in our 5G phones that they're going actually to give us quite an increase in the performance that we are having as we are moving slowly from 5G to 5G plus and then to 6G. So let's not prepare to change our phones in 2030. Probably it's going to take some time after that.
Well, there may well be, of course, people who just want new shiny toys, and you may actually be talking to one of them. But as a grown-up, I realize you're absolutely right. We don't need to replace something that's actually working.
Well, yes.
Of course, of course, we've. There's also the whole thing about the network infrastructure. Now, in the last episode, you were talking about satellite connectivity as well, in addition to and supplementing Wi-Fi connectivity. So I'm just wondering whether, indeed, on an industrial scale, there'll need to be a whole upgrade of all that infrastructure so it can receive these satellite signals, or whether the path has been prepared already. I'm just wondering how much we're going to have to rip out and start again when we're trying to do less wastage of stuff.
Actually, what we call convergence of terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks, there is a very big conversation that actually is being discussed in standards, even as part of 5G. So there is quite a lot of development that's happening already. For instance, with low orbit satellites, look at Starlink, where you can get actually Starlink equipment and get broadband connectivity through Starlink into your home. So it's happening already. However, what is not happening is a single service provider to integrate satellite services within their mobile or their cellular service provisioning. I think that's what we are going to see next. And there are some actually technical developments that we need for this to happen. Quite a lot of new software that needs actually to integrate terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks, but quite a lot the thinking is around the business models. How actually, from a business point of view, this is going to work. Are we going to have, for instance, to see BT to operate our broadband services, fiber broadband, with EE, our mobile services, and then integrate also satellite services? Or is going to be a new industry that is going actually offering that integration on top of the existing service providers? So there are quite a lot of questions, technical and non-technical, but definitely something that we are going to see is that convergence across terrestrial services and non-terrestrial services. And I think that is going to be fundamental, first of all, in order actually to solve that rural connectivity problem that you were just describing, that we are all experiencing, but also to provide resilience in our networks. So satellite is not only for rural, it's also another connectivity that we can use when, for instance, we are experiencing some fault in our terrestrial network. So that is something that is coming. It is in the standards. We are going to see a rollout of terrestrial, non-terrestrial networks converging in the next 5 years.
You've mentioned a number of providers, you've mentioned a number of organizations there. Very modestly, you haven't mentioned what Bristol University and your department actually does. So I wonder if you could give us a little outline of your contribution, whether it's just research or whether you actually do anything practical. I just have no idea. What's Bristol Uni and your role specifically in the forthcoming 6G environment?
Yes, so thank you for giving me this question. Let me start the answering, not focusing on Bristol, but focusing on UK academia. And UK academia is generally excelling in researching telecommunication networks. And that is across, for instance, if you are looking at fiber networks and photonics, if we are looking at wireless networks and the research leadership that we are having, we also have strong satellite research. So there have been a number of initiatives recently, which they are called the UK Future Communication Hubs, that bring together, funded by the UK Research Council, are bringing together more than 50 academics across the UK to work collaboratively and actually innovate research and innovate for the next generation of mobile networks, and that is 6G. And part of this funding from the UK Research Council and from DSEED was actually to create a national testbed where all these researchers could come together and collaborate over a network infrastructure. And this network infrastructure is called Joiner. That stands for Joint Open Infrastructure for Network Research. And actually, I'm privileged to lead the creation of such testbed. So Joiner, it looks like a national network infrastructure. It spans the whole UK. It is actually connecting 11 labs to start with across the UK. And it spans from Glasgow and Belfast all the way down to Southampton, of course, including Bristol and including Oxford and London and Leeds and so on. There's quite a lot of information as to who connect in our website. So the whole purpose about Joiner is actually to bring all these academic assets at the moment, because 6G is still in the research phase, and actually bring researchers and lab together, leverage each other's expertise and resources, and actually bring these research prototypes early to an infrastructure that looks like a real network and demonstrate benefits. So that is the one. The second one is Joiner looks like a real network. It offers connectivity, it offers cloud, it offers actually ways of actually, if you like, connecting users into the network. And the whole idea is there to answer the big questions around networks at scale that is going to come with each of the new generation of mobile network infrastructure. For instance, how much energy we consume in a network and where? The second possible question is what kind of AIs and machine learning we are going to actually deploy in a network end-to-end, and what would be the cost of this AI and what the benefits, counteracting the cost. Other things that we are actually looking at is that actually issues around security and privacy as we are launching the next generation of the networks. And having such a testbed, we are going actually to be able very early on to get experimental evidence around these questions. And getting experimental evidence, hopefully, is going to drive translation of this research into commercial proposition coming from the UK. And that would be patents, that could be contribution to standards, that could be actually spin out companies out of our universities and having some successes into the commercial world. There is another reason why we would like, it is important to have a testbed like this. And one of these reasons is actually to be able to demonstrate to the public, and I go back to your first questions around conspiracies, actually to demonstrate to the public very early on what are these new services and how they are going to feel like, and make actually the public, if you like, stakeholder into our innovation, get feedback, create that relationship of trust, and hopefully by creating trust, we are going to mitigate some of these conspiracy theories as we are launching the next generation of mobile networks. So very excited around Joiner. The UK leading internationally by creating something like this, but there are quite a lot of funding opportunities in Europe and Japan, in the US, where actually other big funding programs that are looking at creation of testbeds like Joiner. So we are on the right track with that.
That sounds great. Now, 5G has been around for about 5.5 years or so in the UK, and we're now talking about 6G. I mean, should I be copywriting the name 7G to make a fast buck in 6 years' time or so? That's looking quite some way ahead, of course, but I'm just wondering when we will start talking about 7G. Do you yet have any thoughts as to what will be incorporated into that?
Yes, don't try to copyright. I think the copyright has already been taken.
That's good advice, thank you. And I hope all the listeners will pay attention.
But, in reality, I don't care about the number in front of a G. I'm looking at all this as evolution of a network and the network infrastructure and network services. So I think the industry needs a number, because that actually signify a start of a new cycle of innovation. For me as an academic, I'm doing research and innovation all my life, so I don't need the number. But if you ask me what 70 is going to look like and what are going to be the new things, and this is a crystal ball moment, I do believe that what we are going to be discussing in 7C is that convergence with quantum. Because there is a parallel stream of work which is extremely popular, and that is called quantum internet. And that involves how we can make quantum computers, how we can launch quantum cloud, how we are going to start using, for instance, quantum sensors. And of course, there are the whole thing around quantum communications.
And there we had to draw things to a close. Quantum computing, quantum security, and 7G are probably topics for another podcast another time. My thanks to Professor Dimitra Simeonidou for taking part, and if you wanted to find out more about the work in which she is involved, do check bristol.ac.uk/research/groups/smart/projects/joiner, or just search 6G Joiner. It's easier on the typing fingers. That's it for the Near Futures this week. Don't forget to check out the website at nearfutures.net, where you can find out more about my services like interviewing people live on stage at your conference if you need that. Meanwhile, see you next time. Thanks very much for listening. Bye.